Hello everyone. It's been a long time. We've been busy finishing this epic battle diorama for the last few months. Joan of Arc, Liberating the Siege of Orleans. As the content is pretty long, we have to split it into two parts to ensure quality and completeness. This will make a total of 4 installments of the entire Siege of Orleans battle scenario. In the last updates, we got the riverbank fortress and the bridgehead on the Loire built for the battle. In this issue, we gonna finish up some floor work and restore the monastery next to the fort. Let's get the work started. In the previous build, the entire board was cut into 3 main modules. Constructed according to the design plan, the entire model is 160 multiplied by 80 centimeters in size. On the left lies the Loire and the bridge castle. In the central, a defensive fortress on the river bank. I've finished building the first 2 modules in the previous updates. Now, I will work on the terrain for the whole scene, and to restore another historical building, a ruined monastery, that also served as a temporary camp. Let's start working on the terrain. Here I went straight for the earthy terrain paste. As the terrain is too large, the putty paste should be applied as thinly as possible. It tends to chafe if it is too thick. You can spray a little water mist while applying to keep the surface moist and extend the operation time. The path was covered with fine gravel and then treated with a putty brush to smooth it. This process is repeated with 1 coat allowed to dry thoroughly before applying a second coat. To remove brush marks from the top layer, I used a sponge dipped in water to gently pat the entire surface. After all the cover dries out, we can move on to the base color. First, the shading. Here, I didn't paint the whole riverbed black, but colored in the areas that needed to be deepened, and by controlling the pressure of the pen, changed the shadows in a more layered way. To make the building and the ground more consistent, I added a little more color to the bottom of the fort. The next step was to paint the riverbed. I didn't dig the foam board very deep this time, and to make the river look real, I first colored the riverbed with paint and then applied a not too thick layer of resin on top. For the main color of the riverbed, I used acrylic paint to mix a bright greenish blue. I also added a light sandstone yellow to the top layer. This makes the transition from light to dark look very natural. Looking at the upper part of the riverbank again, I need to deepen the wagon and path marks and add some highlights. This completes the initial treatment of the entire base color of the terrace. Next, the focus of the content of this installment begins. During the battle, the Augustinian Abbey was first occupied by the British due to its strategic geographic location. Afterward, the French took the abbey back and used it as a stronghold to take the fortress in one fell swoop. The design of this monastery model was inspired by different sources at that time. I will try to recreate a few typical features and make it look real in history. Let's begin by making the floor with a chevron board. Cut it to fit the design and split the area, then carve out the seams of the interior bricks. After that, I'll work on making the main entrance for this abbey. Here I made some preparations in advance. The main material used for the building is XPS foam board. The modules for the front wall were cut to scale according to the model. The whole wall was textured with bricks. I also 3D printed different sizes of columns that will be used in each area. Splicing the vault and the columns together completes the door frame. Next up is the window. A circle was created around the perimeter of the window frame using sculpting clay. Scrape off the excess putty and use a sculpting knife to carve out the texture. A pattern for the window ribs was laser engraved on thin pieces of wood. Putty the entire wall to fill any excess gaps. The front door wall module is partially finished. Set aside to dry naturally. The main structure of the building looks like this. Entered through the main entrance. It is a 2-story main hall with a bell tower in the center. The backyard includes a 4-square cloister and an atrium surrounding the building on 3 sides. Next up is the cloister, which is a covered area around a square in a monastery. The walls around the cloister were still cut and carved to scale using XPS boards, then spliced together with the corresponding columns. Here I only made 3 sides of the corridor, and the houses on both sides are also made directly in the broken look. Once the modules for these structures were done, I filled them with putty paste. The Abbey, which has been repeatedly subjected to war, is now in ruins everywhere. The original structure of the top floor of the building has also been burned, revealing the structural framework, and the tiles are scattered and fragmented. In the upcoming productions, I will create those damage effects step by step. For easier painting, I divided the walls of the entire building into several modules. This room is on the side of the Abbey. The walls have been ruined, and many broken bricks are inside. The first coat was mainly to cover the shadows. I painted all the modules piece by piece, deepening the shadows in the more damaged areas. After the base color dries, I'll hand paint the details and reassemble the scattered pieces. Use a sponge brush. Dip a small amount of acrylic paint and press it onto the wall. Do not color repeatedly in one spot to avoid leaving brush marks. Use the brush again for detailed coloring. The brick seam lines on the truncated side of the wall will also need to be carved out and colored. The mortar lines are the key to creating a realistic appearance on the wall. Handle each seam patiently, and for the parts that cannot be outlined with a brush, increase the amount of water to allow the color to penetrate the seams naturally. With one side of the wall color complete, the columns and walls on the other side of the hall can be installed next. Use glue to secure the hall columns to the floor, and then attach the wall above. Here, I will display an easy way to make crushed stone. The foam board is cut into small squares and placed directly into a container of acrylic paint. It is then stirred for color. Place the broken bricks messily on the floor. Cover with a layer of grayish-black terrain clay, blotting it out with water. Continue using the airbrush to deepen the shadows. The top layer also needs to be masked with dust. Use the color pastel stick to scrape off a small amount on top of the building debris. Some broken stone bricks are scattered on the backyard lawn as well. Again, use scenic clay to create the broken effect. Next comes the wood frame and roof. Use battens to create the roof frames for the lofts on both sides. The top of the frame is covered with thin wooden shingles. Cardboard tiles were glued on layer by layer. The bell tower on the roof had a directly constructed broken frame. I tried using fire experimentally to make the burning at the top look more realistic. Notes: for safety reasons, this method is only suitable for creating effects in specific areas. The rest of the piece still needs to be colored using an airbrush. The roof above the cloister was constructed in the same manner. There's a big, jagged hole here with broken boards and shingles scattered all around. Painting exterior walls and roofing. Next, I will add details to the battlefield. This scene takes place as the French have recaptured the Abbey and are using it as a frontline camp to prepare for a general attack on the fortress of Tourelles. I built fences around the Abbey with thin pieces of wood about 4 millimeters wide. Here is a revolving gate for defense, and a plank bridge was laid over the ditch. The watchtower next to the campsite was made from these thin strips of wood. Very easy to make, starting with wooden slats to build the supports and making a fence around the top. Next, I'll grass the scene. The glue dries quickly, so the lawn has to be laid out piece by piece. Electrostatically flop the grass and brush away the excess. Usually, I will be mixed with similar colors of several grass powders so that the lawn looks more natural. In this video, I tried to cover the whole process as best as possible, but there still might be something missing. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments, and I'll do my best to help. The next installment will also be the last of this series. I'll finish the river and the details of the armies, carriages, and facilities. And now we've reached the end. You can find more details about this build at the end of the video. Thank you for your likes and continued interest in our work, and we hope our work brings you a different kind of sensual pleasure. See you next time.